Everyone. So today we're going to be talking about scanography or scanograms. And as you know, I posted the Project 1 description, and this is what we'll be doing next class. So I want you to get some inspiration from this lecture, and I'm going to be showing you a lot of different examples of artists that use this technique in their own work. The really interesting thing about scanography or scanograms is that you are bringing the material to the flatbed scanner in order to create compositions and to create meaning. So the official definition would be the process of capturing digitized images of objects for the purpose of creating printable art using a flatbed photo scanner. So let's jump right in and look at our first artist. This is the artist Megan Mueller. And as you can see, this technique is really interesting because it captures things in such high resolution. The scanner itself is going across the flat bed, and it's actually recording things much sharper than the optics of most digital SLR cameras will. And the light is actually scanning from top to bottom, and it's very much like a Xerox copier. Here, this artist is exploring landscape, and so she actually does her scanograms at night, and she takes a scanner and pushes it up against different parts of the landscape and actually makes this recording. So this is not done inside. This is taking the scanner and using it very much like a camera. And you could see that there's a lot of interesting results, and the light in the scan itself is really coming from within. It's coming from the scanner. That bluish white way that the world is being described, that's the scanner scanning what's in front of it. Here's another piece by Megan Mueller, and here simplicity is often the biggest thing that I can stress for a successful scanography or a scanogram. Here she found some grid, some fencing where this vine was growing, and then she just placed her scanner there. The other thing that's quite unusual about these scans by Megan Mueller is that the background is white instead of black. And you'll notice that many times when we're doing scans, the darkness behind what is being illuminated shows up because of the fact that there's no light anywhere that's strong enough to be recorded. But here she's doing these outside, and this is actually done during the day. So there's sunlight that's cascading through the back of this vine, and so she's illuminating the foreground. The other thing you might notice is that the depth of field or the level of focus is very specific on a scanogram because it's designed to actually focus on whatever's placed on the glass of the scanner and not focus on anything beyond that. So often what is touching the glass is going to be sharp and in focus, and what's not is going to be out of focus. And here's a really good example of that actually happening with these two sunflowers, one sunflower, and you can see that whatever is touching the glass becomes sharp, and whatever is not is going to be very out of focus. And simplicity is very much the key here because of the way that we're relying on building up information ourselves with objects that we gather. So I like this work because of how simple it is, and it creates a very ethereal mood. And there's a lot of conceptual backing to thinking about how she's recording things documenting them or archiving them in this very unorthodox way. So the next artist that we're going to be talking about is Lucy Stahl, and these look like a lot of fun to do because of the objects that she's bringing to the scanner and the way that she's thinking about including layers or layering in the process of creating her work. The actual artist's hand can be seen in the bottom of the composition. And notice how this composition is symmetrical. You can fold it in half and it's kind of equal on either side. But there is a primary element, which is that collage rhinoceros that's in the middle of the composition. So what these are akin to are kind of digging up or grabbing images and allowing them to be recorded. She's thinking about ways in which images can be dug up in the archaeological sense, and you can see the flaking of the mud off of her hands is something that is reminiscent of maybe digging in the ground. And so that metaphor is coming through very strongly in this work. The images that she chooses are often pulled from other sources. So she's thinking about the way in which all of these different images come together to create new meaning. So when you're pulling objects from your life, think about how they can be actually reapplied to create other meanings for other people. And they could mean a lot to you, but try to translate that meaning so that other people can be able to understand that story. Here's another one by Lucy Stahl, and the same strategy of the hands coming in and presenting this from this darkness, and it's coming into striking focus. The eeriness of these is that we are not sure who this person is that's presenting these artifacts to us, but they are artifacts pulled from our popular media landscape or our popular culture. So here's a commercial image that's being presented, and this is often written about this work as this kind of post-apocalyptic view of what our digital spaces have become. And it's interesting because the presentation of these are large scale photographs, and they're actually poured epoxy resin on top of them, so they have a really reflective mottled surface, almost like they're preserved in ice or some sort of sci-fi capsule. Here's the last one, in an installation view of her work. And this is something that you would imagine would take a lot of preparation and arrangement. So she's gluing things together. She's creating these intuitive connections between images. And that's how the construction or the preparation of this project really comes into play. You want to think about and maybe sketch some different arrangements for your objects. What is going to be the background? Here you can see that it's a brown paper. That's the background in this. And how are you going to get that quality of light when the light source is so uniform? How will you be able to get that tonal separation and the drama of light with this process? It will take a little bit of practice, but we'll be able to go on 2 different scanners in the classroom, and we'll be working simultaneously. The only thing I ask is that you make sure that you don't bring any liquids with you while you're scanning on the flatbed scanners. But we do have a protective sheet of glass that you can bring other things that might be untraditional or not conforming to just maybe an object. necessarily. And email me if you have specific questions about what you can or cannot bring for scanning, and I'll be sure to double check with you before you start. But sketching out compositions are really important. Here's some other examples that are pulled from the internet. These are general scanographies that I thought were interesting to show, and it gives you a sense of how people are using objects and arranging them in these configurations. If you read closely on the project description, I did ask that maybe you consider bringing photography or text or something that is flat. And here in the work on the top right, that's really interesting in how that text is really speaking um, as part of this larger composition. So these are options. Here's another option with photography, and the little wave that's happening in the middle here is actually coming from movement. So as the scanner goes from the top to the bottom, if you move objects as the scan is happening, interesting manipulations start to happen. And here the background was this kind of reflective mylar material, and the artist kind of moved it around as the scan was happening, creating these waves of light, this dissonance, so to speak. And a simple vernacular photograph is in the center here. Here's a really interesting, colorful image where the artist actually put their face on the scanner surface and then scanned all around. We do have a little bit of a prompt when thinking about what we're going to be scanning, and we do want to tell a story, and we do want to think about the preservation of memory or the preservation of objects through this process. So I'm asking you to get something that means something to you. Bring something in that you want to preserve, but also present in a very creative way. And you can see that the color here in this work is really acting as a catalyst for reception. The catalyst here is that all those colors are vibrating, and the darkness around those colors, we can kind of get a different story because of the person that's hiding behind there. So for some tips for scanning is traditionally these are going to be looking like they're almost uniform with their black background, but you want to try to do some creative things to actually counteract that. You might want to bring in some colored paper or colored plastic. You might want to introduce some stronger lights behind your objects so that they could actually be illuminated from a different light source in addition to the light source on the scanner. So these are things that you want to be aware of. Also, pick objects that react in an interesting way to light. Light can travel through things that are transparent or semi-transparent. They can reflect back. Mirrors are often very interesting to scan because they reflect light back into the scanner lens. So think about that when you're bringing in some objects. The other thing is you have to keep things simple. There's a tendency to go too far with the amount of objects that you place and how busy a composition can get. Make sure you keep things simple and that there's a primary element in your compositions, meaning that there is a single subject and all of the other elements in the composition are supporting that single subject. So hopefully you got a lot from this lecture about scanography or scanograms, and you're able to find some inspiration for next class when we actually do this in person.